In this episode of Chop and Brew, we're getting pro tips on brewing with fruit from Damian McConn, head brewer at Summit Brewing Company. Using the brewery's Cabin Crusher and Late Crusher series of Fruited Kolsch as examples, Damo discusses using high-quality purees and peel to achieve refreshing, bright, fruit-bursting flavors in beer, as well as the evolution of summer seasonal releases at the brewery. It's the second of 3 pro tips videos featuring Damian, all brought to you with support from Imperial Yeast and our most wonderful Patreon supporters who you can join at patreon.com/chopandbrew. Our third video will be a side-by-side tasting and discussion of the brewery's flagship Saga IPA and its new cousin, Saga Hazy IPA. There is some really fun, technical, hophead nerd stuff coming up that you're going to want to see. So be sure to subscribe to Chop and Brew's YouTube channel so you don't miss it. All right, we're here at Summit's training room. Lovely St. Paul. We're slowly losing control of the area around us.
It's getting a little more entertaining, there's no doubt about it, as we get further into the evening here on a Friday.
So we want to do one more video kind of about, in general terms, it's kind of about brewing with fruit. They've got a Cabin Crusher, the OG with lime, and then it's kind of morphed over some of the years, and it's now a Late Crusher with berry, tangerine, Kolsch with lemon, Damo once again. So before we talk about brewing with fruit, just super quick, I wanted to kind of pick your brain about like the evolution of the summer seasonal, because you guys have been around since '86. One thing never lasts for too long, so kind of talk about
I'd say in the United States that summer seasonal, that summer limited availability beer, whatever you want to call it, is probably one of the more challenging styles to pull off. Because think about, in the fall you can do Oktoberfest. In the wintertime you can maybe do a traditional English style winter warmer, such as Summit Winter Ale. I think in the springtime you can maybe throw out a couple of old school favorites like our Horizon Red IPA, which has the malt flavor and the body and the hop character kind of stand up to some cooler winter weather here in Minnesota. But I think in the summer it's a little tricky, because especially in the northern part of the states where summer it's a fairly small window, let's be honest. I mean, it was snowing around here last week, and we're in May. I mean, it'll be snowing again here in September the way we're going.
Yeah.
So
Thanks for reminding me.
We have I think at Summit we have played around with styles that you would normally associate with traditional summer beers in Europe over the years. So our Hefeweizen, our German style wheat beer, for many years using a traditional Weinstefan Hefe yeast, a lot of wheat malt in there, lower ABV, very refreshing, great beer. Then we moved into Kolsch, a very traditional iteration of Kolsch in terms of a traditional yeast strain from Cologne, using traditional German style hops like Tettnang, cold fermentation, longer period of cold maturation. So trying to really emulate that crisp, clean note of a lager beer, but have some of the fruity characteristics of that.
Is that summer ale?
Yeast. That would have been summer ale, yeah,
Yep.
which is a very, very traditional version of a classic Kolsch style beer. And then just in the last couple of years, we've been playing around with using really, really high quality fruit puree in some of those Kolsch style beers. We came out with Cabin Crusher, which has some really nice key lime puree from our friends at Oregon Fruit. And one of the reasons we like to work with those guys is that there's no crap in there. So we're not using extracts, but we're also not working with raw fruit where you've got some micro issues, right? You've got to be really careful about how you're handling fruit in a brewery. We add the fruit to the hot site, right?
The purees have been pasteurized.
Yeah, well, exactly. They are aseptic in terms of their micro. So we're always concerned about micro and what are the potentials for bringing in an ingredient that could potentially cause an issue with our micro profile for any of our beers, not just the Crusher series. And working with Oregon Fruit, who operate an aseptic process, they're still retaining the essence of the fruit. It's very, very high quality in terms of the ingredients. So we use Meyer lemon, which has a really, really unique flavor profile that we like.
For real.
Bringing in, cranberries from Wisconsin that are processed by Oregon Fruit. They really add an extra layer of flavor to that berry crusher. So we're working with a great supplier, and we're using it typically in the whirlpool. So we're not adding it on the cold side. Some breweries do add it on the cold side. That's a risky proposition, not because of the fruit itself. because it's aseptic, but it's the point of transfer. How are you going to get that puree, if you're working a puree, into an FE or into a bright tank and not potentially have a source of contamination as the final beer?
Straight up opening it.
Exactly. That's the danger, right? So breweries will get around that, of course, by using extracts, and extracts can often be alcohol based. So the booze and the extract doesn't really kill anything. They're essentially sterile-ish. Yeah. We don't like to use the extracts because, quite frankly, they just don't give the same flavor profile that we're looking for. They don't give the same depth of complexity that we're looking for. So we're really happy with the quality that we get and the consistency that we get from the Oregon fruit folk. It's not cheap. They those ingredients are
well, for you guys,
yeah.
I buy a 30.
Yeah. I'm buying a 55-gallon drum, and maybe a couple of them at a time. But it's worth it because you really notice the depth of flavor and the ability to integrate that flavor into the overall base beer is a little bit easier when you're working with a high quality puree, I would argue.
And you also use peel, several of these.
Use a little bit of peel, yeah.
Dry peel?
Use dry peel and just add that in a traditional manner as you'd associate with, say, a Belgian-style white beer, where you're adding it to the whirlpool or the kettle at the end of the boil in bags.
So peel might go in the boil, but the purees always kind of flame out.
Exactly, yeah.
Would you not want to cook the puree?
Nope, so you're adding it as late as you can in the process. You're not losing too many of those aromatics, those volatiles.
Okay.
So we're adding it literally as we are knocking out into the whirlpool, and then we're retaining as much of those aromatics as we can in the whirlpool. The peel is typically added towards the end of the boiled bags.
Would a homebrewer consider adding fruit puree maybe at like 24, 48 hours? Almost kind of like a staggered fermentable, or still not recommended? I just don't. You want it in there to get at least sterilized.
It's not necessarily, like I said, the ingredient itself. It's the point of addition. It's how sterile, how sanitary are your hoses, are your clamps, are your hookup points, and even if you're a pretty solid brewery with good microsampling techniques and a good program in place, you can still run into issues when you're working with fruit because it's cumbersome. It's not like adding hot material. It's not like pitching yeast. It's just a little bit awkward to work with back there. And I think when you add it to at the very end of the hot side, you get the best of both worlds. You retain all of those aromatics that you want to work with. You get the flavor elements that are an integral part of the overall profile of the beer, and you don't run the risk of potentially a micro-contamination on the cold side. So it's literally probably the best all-around approach, I think.
It's a minute dilution point, but I mean...
But you're going to dilute it on the cold side either way. So whether you're adding it on the hot side or adding it on the cold side, there's always that dilution factor to consider.
Yeah.
But the difference is you're adding it to hot wort as opposed to adding it to partially fermented or fully fermented cold finished beer.
Yeah, and if you cold crash something that went in during hot side, chances are you're going to get it completely out,
right,
as well.
So it's, to me, it's a nice balance. And when you're working with a puree, and we add a fair amount of puree to these beers, when you're working with those ingredients, you're still getting a noticeable flavor element, but it's not the fake artificial type note that you get with extracts, right? Which I don't really care for a whole lot. But you can literally, as the old saying goes, taste the difference when you're working with a high quality fruit puree. That Meyer lemon, we worked with Oregon
that lemon
fruit.
Is like
we were one of the
oily, peely, like
it's really nice, and we worked with Oregon fruit to develop that ingredient a few years back. We were a test brewer when they first were trying to develop that. It's a varietal specific puree, and they wanted to work with someone who had some strong sensory programs in-house that could provide them with the feedback that they required to bring it on full-time as an ingredient. So we were one of the very, very first people that they wanted to work with, and it's been really successful for them.
There's Meyer lemon in the lemon version. There's key lime only, or like key lime and regular lime, or just
straight key lime. And you really notice
it has kind of like, I don't know, for some reason key lime seems sweet even though it's still so acidic. It is and tart.
It is, but it has just like a background sweetness that pops out. And we worked with other lime purees from Oregon fruit, and they're perfectly good ingredients, but there's something else about that key lime that just pops, man. It's just,
people don't make lime pies.
Yeah,
they make key lime.
Exactly, right? Exactly. It really is noticeable, and the Meyer Lemon was something similar. So.
Well, and the Kolsch is such a great kind of base palate for these, right? I mean, it's not like it's a stout where you're like, it's lost in all this other stuff. So
it is, and we're still using a traditional Kolsch yeast. We're still cold fermenting, still cold conditioning. We're still using classical ingredients like Tettnang hops, and that's an absolutely key element to all of these beers. I think having that consistency of approach and ingredients allows us to take a great style, use it as a foundation, and then build a little bit of flavor and aroma on top of it based on these kind of really interesting fruit characteristics. And they are great summer beers. I mean, the feedback on all of these have been spectacularly
when they
positive.
celebrate, like with your key market being kind of Minnesota, Wisconsin, Dakota's like Cabin Crusher, Lake Crusher, the graphics are very up northy.
Right,
So, I mean,
exactly. We are in cabin country
Yeah,
in
it's
the
a
upper
brewery
Midwest, right?
speaking to your summer drinking experience.
Yeah, I mean, you go up to Brainerd, Bemidji, you go up to northern Wisconsin, you're going to find these beers all over the place. And they really do lend themselves well to that whole culture of being out on the boat, being out on the dock, doing a bit of fishing or whatever. And they are eminently drinkable. 4.5%, low in bitterness, but they are really, really refreshing, and they have a lot of that fruit character that makes them really balanced and complex.
All right, Damo. Well, happy summer. Enjoy it.
Here we go, brother.
Enjoy it.
Finally, it's finally here.
Enjoy it for the 7 weeks we get it. I'll see you at Oktoberfest in late August.
Sláinte, brother.